Sabharwal, and there's a lot to say about him, but let's not waste time. Let me, in a jiffy, let me begin with his introduction. Mr. Kunal Sabharwal is an advocate practicing as a counsel in various courts of Delhi. He is regularly practicing at NCLT, NCLT, and CDRC. His practices includes diverse area of corporate and commercial litigation. He has represented and advised various multinational companies. His experience in the real estate domain comprises of advising in relation to land acquisitions, development of commercial farms, malls, multiplexes, and whatnot. I'd also like to mention, prior to venturing out of the as an independent practitioner, Sir worked with Singhania and Partners LLP, DSK Legal, and LNL Partners law firms. Welcome, sir. So, without wasting any time, I would like Kunal sir to take over from here. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Chakit Singhal ji. Thank you, Jyoti Bakshi ji, for affording this opportunity to be a speaker on this webinar. And primarily, I'm speaking on the Commercial Courts Act, the practice and the procedure. Now, in order to understand the practicality and the procedural aspect of the Commercial Courts Act, it is very essential to know the background in which this act was promulgated and formulated and why the need arose. So if we go back a little 3 decades back in the history, in 1991, the liberalization of the Indian economy occurred. As a result of which, there was a lot of foreign direct investment which came through government route as well as through automatic route. The resultantly, it made a lot of investments, agreements in place, joint ventures, shareholders agreement, a lot of contracts getting into place. The world got connected with Indian entities, and where there are a lot of commercial development, contractual obligations, there ought to be certain disputes emanating out of it. Now, when these disputes emanated out of it, initially we are working with the same CPC, the original, which is the, governs the normal suit procedure. And there was an Arbitration Act in place, which was of 1940, which there have been a lot of debates in the yesteryears that it was outdated by the time 90s arrived. So subsequently, what happened was in 2003, there was a Law Commission report, 188th Law Commission report, which proposed that needs to be an overhaul vis-a-vis a commercial litigation and the way and the manner in which the commercial disputes are to be adjudicated. Now, what this Law Commission proposed was that there has to be an establishment of a commercial division, separate commercial courts, which are dealing purely with commercial disputes of a specified value. That value initially was proposed to be 1 crore or between 5 crores. And certain proposals were made to the law minister. Subsequently, what happened in 2009, for some reason, until 2009, this report was never taken into consideration. 2009, the Lok Sabha passed this, considered the report and the importance of a commercial court need to be established. Now, after that, the Lok Sabha initially passed it and referred it to the upper house of the parliament, which is Rajya Sabha. The Rajya Sabha, before deliberating on it, requested and suggested that it to be referred to a selected committee. The select committee suggested certain changes and they had certain reservations. One of the main reservations was vis-a-vis vesting of the original jurisdictions in the high courts, which have none. Another was that the way and the manner it has been proposed to formulate a Commercial Courts Act, it only refers to the elitist. Reason being, it creates a difference between a dispute which holds a less in terms of a monetary value, a dispute which is much more of a monetary value. As a result of which, they said that it may not stand on its legs when the principles of Article 14 would be taken into consideration. Accordingly, certain amendments were sought to be made and suggested. Subsequent to suggestions, the select committee suggested certain recommendations and again preferred the bill before the tabled the bill before the Rajya Sabha. The then law ministers sought time that even then the act needed the bill needed certain clarifications and certain more and there more work needs to be done, and accordingly it was taken back. It was not tabled for approval and hence it could not come and became an act. Now, thereafter, what happened was in 2009, and we can see from 2000 onwards in 2015, the way commercial activities have increased and the way the contractual disputes have been escalated. It's a sea of difference. What we could have imagined, the commercial practice as in early 90s, even early 2000, and which existed in, beyond 2010, the level of infrastructure disputes, the disputes, quay constructions, real estate transactions, joint ventures, shareholders agreement, oil and gas. So everything, it's basically increased exponentially. In 2015, again, the 253rd Law Commission was headed by the then Justice A.P. Shah. He proposed that further changes in considering all the previous issues, suggestions, reservations being made, and proposed that a commercial division, commercial appellate division, and Commercial Court Act 2015 be promulgated. The then Law Minister, Mr. Gowda, presented the same before the Lok Sabha. It was approved after discussion. It was approved and subsequently it was promulgated. Now, this is a brief history, and I must tell and I must inform that while drafting this act, there has been a lot of consideration quay the acts which are in existence in the courts in United States, United Kingdom, Singapore, France, et al. Now, one of the main considerations was that there was a matter case named as suit, which was in the circuit court in United States, which was Bhatnagar versus Surinder Trading. In that suit, what happened was the principle of forum non-convenience was invoked by the US courts to vest a jurisdiction onto them where there was no cause of action was has arisen in US. The entire subject matter of the dispute was in India. The cause of action arose in India. But even then, because one of the parties was a foreign party, which was preferably a US party, in that case, the US court assumed a jurisdiction, and one of the basic reason for holding there is a forum non-convenience was the way and the manner the civil suits and even the commercial suits at that relevant point of time were being dealt with. And they said that, it takes more than 2 decades to even have an adjudication and then the enforcement. So this itself gives a reason to the US courts to vest jurisdiction onto them. However, before that, in 1986 itself, the US courts at one point of time refused to do so, and that was a famous case in the Union Carbide, the Bhopal gas case, which we say, wherein they said that it will be a travesty where, because India is a world power and we cannot take away a jurisdiction from a country whose courts have been there and they are on a democratic basis and their adjudication system has been improving with every passing day. Now this Bhatnagar case came into 1996 and subsequently the need arose and this case was being invoked as a precedent in every other matter. Now subsequently what happened, now coming back to 2015 again, so this act was promulgated and passed. So there are certain aspects which I want to give you. So what happened, as we all know, that in 2018 also this act has been amended. Now in 2015, initially this act was promulgated to vest jurisdiction only in high courts for commercial suits wherein the jurisdiction was 1 crore and above. Any suit, irrespective whether commercial or otherwise, of 1 crore or below would be governed by the normal civil procedure code. Now, with the advent of the Commercial Courts Act, there were a host of amendments which were made into the Commercial Courts Act. Now, coming back to 2015 again, so this act was promulgated and passed. So there are certain aspects which I want to give you. So what happened, now coming back to 2015 again, so this act was promulgated to vest jurisdiction only in high courts for commercial suits wherein the jurisdiction was 1 crore and above. Any suit, irrespective whether commercial or otherwise, of 1 crore or below would be governed by the normal civil procedure code. Now, with the advent of the Commercial Courts Act, there were a host of amendments which were made into the CPC. Now, the purpose of this Commercial Court Act was to leave behind the burden of the litigation, which we've been doing since yesteryears, and to revamp and overhaul the entire process in a way that it streamlines, it becomes more logical, it becomes more objective, and a mere simple dragging of any litigation is not permissible in any manner whatsoever. Now, insofar as 2015 Act is concerned, one thing was sure that there were no district courts vested with commercial jurisdiction. Only the high courts had the jurisdiction to decide the commercial dispute, and that to 1 crore and above, as I stated earlier. And the specified value, basically what happens is, in the Commercial Courts Act, any commercial dispute of a specified value is governed by the Commercial Courts Act. Now, vis-a-vis these disputes, the specified value was previously 1 crore. And another important aspect was that what should be the commercial dispute? So the legislature, and that was the Law Commission also pointed out, that we need to give an expansive definition to what shall be considered to be a commercial dispute, including mercantile transaction, shareholders dispute, joint venture dispute. It goes so far that even the disputes pertaining to immovable properties, where the immovable property is being used for the commercial use, will be considered to be as a commercial dispute under the Commercial Courts Act. Now, in 2015, when this act came, so there were certain things, certain issues which are supposed to be taken care of. So one was the constitution of the commercial courts in 2018, which was with respect to the vesting of jurisdiction before in the district courts as well. Now, with the vesting of district courts, there were two confusions which had to be alleviated. Now, one was that what happens, because we know, as we all know, there are 5 high courts which are vested with the original jurisdiction, pecuniary jurisdiction, wherein we can, if our matter is subject matter of the dispute is beyond a certain value, we can directly go to that high court. So that is only the one is the 3 of the presidency courts: Bombay, Madras, Kolkata, Delhi, and now Jammu Kashmir as well. Now, with respect to the Delhi, so what happens with respect to these things? The commercial disputes the district courts were vested with the power. And in order to put jurisdiction into the district courts, the specified value for a commercial dispute was reduced substantially from 1 crore to 3 lakhs. In Delhi High Court, what they did, that there was another notification that from 1 crore, they increased that the jurisdiction for a high court, original jurisdiction of a high court, to 2 crores. Now, with respect to what happens when you file a matter. So there were 3 kind of courts which are made. Section 3 prescribes 1, the constitution of the commercial courts. Section 3A prescribes, which were added by virtue of, say, amendment of 2018. It says the designations of commercial appellate court. Now, the appellate division, the division bench of a high court is called as, defined as a commercial division bench, appellate division. And whereas there's another difference, there's another commercial appellate court. Now, the difference between the two is when a matter which is ranging between 3 lakhs to 2 crores, those matters which are necessarily to be filed before the district court. In that case, if there is an order or a judgment which is being passed, which is appealable under the Commercial Courts Act, or probably section 37 with section 13 of the Commercial Courts Act decides that, and it says only 2 things. I'll come to that later. In that case, the appeal would lie before the Commercial Appellate Court and not the Commercial Appellate Division. The Commercial Appellate Court in that case was the High Court, where the pecuniary jurisdiction is vested, and it would go with the single judge. Now, where there was there's an original jurisdiction which is vested for those high courts, let's say Bombay, Madras, Kolkata, which is Calcutta, and Delhi and Jammu Kashmir. In those matters, the appeal would lie with the commercial appellate division and not the commercial appellate courts. So thereby, the commercial appellate court would only be where the high courts do not have a pecuniary jurisdiction, in summary. Now, what is with respect to there's another important point which needs to be considered, that, and which we see every day in the practice also, that the bar against the revision application or petition against, there is a section 8 of the Commercial Courts Act, which categorically says that no revision shall lie or against an interlocutory order. Now, this leads to a further confusion which we face every
But
now
to
and then.
pause you here, we are not able to hear you properly, Kunal sir. If you can be a little louder. Yeah.
Am I audible now?
Yeah, now it's okay. Very fine. Very fine.
Hello, am I audible now?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. My apologies. So another important aspect which we face every day is that whether a revision lies with respect when an interlocutory order is passed. The question is that section 8 of the Commercial Courts Act and is not. The answer to this is that the section 8 of the Commercial Court Act categorically prohibits so. Now there has been a long-standing debate since Babulal Khemji that what should be the interlocutory order. The interlocutory order can be appealable or not. That's also been dealt by the Supreme Court in a number of judgments. Now, one of the cases where an interlocutory order finally adjudicates the right of the parties in some way or for either of the party, then the aggrieved can file an appeal. But when it comes to the Commercial Courts Act, the procedure is different. It's a complete overhaul of the procedure. The Commercial Courts Act prescribes appeal only in certain cases, and which provides by section 13 of the Commercial Courts Act, which says that any order, the order appealable would be if it falls within the realm and four corners of order 43 of the CPC, or it is an order passed under section 37 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 as amended. Now, the issue came up for consideration before the Honorable, initially in 2017, before the division bench, Honorable Division Bench of the Delhi High Court in the matter of HPL, India Limited. So where HPL India Limited came up before the Honorable High Court Division Bench, wherein they challenged an order wherein they were prevented from placing on record certain documents after the suit was filed, and there was a certain time period, that is, which is 30 days within which you can file certain documents, and it went by. Now, the dispute was, they argued that this order adjudicates my right to a placing certain documents which are essential for the dispute. And as such, it finally adjudicates and it is appealable in nature. The division bench of the High Court categorically held that the scheme of the Commercial Courts Act is such that whatever is there under section 13, it will only be appealable, and beyond that, there can be no appeal which can be filed. Now, the question, another twist to this was, which came up before the Supreme Court, and that was a matter pertaining to an international arbitration in the matter of Kandla Export Corporation. Now, in that matter, Kandla Export Corporation, an appeal under the Commercial Courts Act, section 13 was filed, read with section 50 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act. The opposite party argued that this appeal is not maintainable because the Commercial Courts Act section 13 does not prescribe for that. The only appeal which can be, the only orders which are appealable are prescribed under order 43 CPC or section 37 of the Arbitration and the Conciliation Act. The Supreme Court categorically said that Arbitration Act, being a special legislation and a complete self-contained code, the statutory right to appeal under Section 50 cannot be undermined by a general law such as Commercial Court Act. And therefore, an appeal under Section 50 would certainly lie, but for only those orders which are appealable under Section 50. So these are the two aspects which are very closely, because usually all the commercial disputes as of today, they contain arbitration clauses. So this is one of the confusion which was put at rest by the High Court of Delhi Division Bench and as well as by the Supreme Court in the matter of Kandla Export Corporation. Now, I will come back to certain other important aspects of the matter. Now, there's another issue. What provides it? So whenever a commercial suit or a commercial dispute is filed, there is a mandatory pre-institution of mediation, which is mandate, that you have to go for a mandatory mediation hearing before you launch or you file a commercial suit in the court, whether in district court or in the high court. Now, the issue is, with respect, the only leeway is where a party is claiming an urgent relief, saying injunction, a temporary ex parte injunction is being claimed. In those cases, the provision of Section 12A, which prescribe for a mandatory mediation, are not applicable. In that case, you can avoid them. However, in other cases, you have to follow this route. Now, this route further prescribes certain things. There's a timeline of 90 days within which the mediation happens. There's a very nominal fee of 1,000 rupees, which you have to pay as a matter of to the DLSA. There are mediation rules which have been prescribed alongside the Commercial Courts Act, and a further leeway of an extension of 2 months is to be given in case the parties are on the verge or probably going ahead with the final filing of the settling of the mediation dispute. Another beauty is that any dispute which is settled in terms of this Section 12A by virtue of mediation, that is being termed to be akin to an award which has been passed under Section 30 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 and shall be enforceable as a decree. Now, there are certain other things with respect to the commercial jurisdiction. Now, it also says that the commercial suits or the commercial disputes for which there is a specified forum which has been prescribed under any act for the time being in force. Those acts, those disputes cannot be relegated to the civil court under the Commercial Courts Act. Now, the Commercial Court Act also prescribes the manner in which the specified value is to be adjudicated, that how to arrive that what is that specified value of a dispute is falling between 3 lakhs to 2 crores or probably beyond 2 crores. So all these things have been prescribed with respect to the immovable property, dispute pertaining to the immovable property, dispute pertaining to the recovery of money, even recovery of damages and such other relief. Now, with the advent of Commercial Courts Act, there were a lot of commercial disputes which are there existing but were being dealt with the CPC normal in the normal suits. So what happened to those suits? So there's a provision which was introduced in the form of Section 15 of the Commercial Courts Act, which mandates that there'll be a transfer of pending cases and how it is to be done. So the only exception which it created was, it says that where the suits are an application which is ripe for the final judgment or where the final judgment has been reserved, those shall not be transferred, barring that all the suits shall stand transferred. Now, there's another important aspect of the matter of this Commercial Disputes Act. The law as it's vis-a-vis the High Court practice rules and vis-a-vis the Commercial Courts Act. If we look into section 16 of the Commercial Courts Act, which provides for the amendment to the CPC when there is a commercial dispute, it provides that where there is a conflict, so the law as settled by the Honorable Supreme Court is that wherever there is a dispute between the applicability of the High Court procedural rules, practice rules, and CPC, the rules of a particular High Court shall gain precedence and apply. However, there is an exception carved out under section 16 of the Commercial Courts Act, which says that in case there is any conflict between the amended provisions of the CPC and the practice and the procedural rules prescribed by the High Court, jurisdictional High Court, in that case, the provisions of the CPC as amended by the Commercial Courts Act shall prevail. Now, with the advent of the Commercial Courts Act, there was a complete overhaul, as we have seen in 2018, with respect to the Delhi High Court rules. And initially, the Delhi High Court rules were amended substantially on 27th of February 2018 and subsequently on 16th of October 2018. There was chapter 17 which was added, specifically prescribing from the practice and the directions, and annexure E was placed to say what is to be done and how the suit is to be filed and how everything is to be managed. Now, there are certain very important and mandatory provisions which there has been a complete shift from the routine litigation which we do in the civil suits. Now, certain provisions, I will take you to certain provisions. I will discuss with certain provisions with respect to the amendments which have been made in the CPC and how that affects the regular practice. And before that, I must tell you that in terms of section 21 of the Commercial Courts Act, this act has been, there's a non-obstant provision which has been added, which says that this act shall override all other acts, notwithstanding where anything is inconsistent. Now let us see how certain provisions are being added and amended in the CPC specifically for the commercial suits and the commercial disputes, so as to act as a deterrent that no person, meaning thereby no litigant, should exploit the process of law to derail, delay, or in some way or the other cause injustice and unnecessary dragging of a litigation. So what it has been done is, and also apart from that, there have been specific rules which have been introduced whereby any statement being made cannot be made in a cavalier and a casual manner. Any statement which you make or any plaint which you file, it has to be supported with a statement of truth. And any ground, if found that the statement of the truth which you have made is false, then there are serious repercussions, not only of cost, but even otherwise. Now, let us see the first amendment which has been made to the CPC was an amendment in section 26 of the CPC. In section 26 of the CPC, there was a proviso which was added after subsection 2, which says that along with the plaint, an affidavit which is in the form of a statement of truth is to be filed, and it has been prescribed in Order 6 Rule 15A of the CPC, which has been specifically inserted for the Commercial Courts Act, for the commercial suits. There has been an appendix which is there, which says which prescribes the form and manner wherein the statement of truth is to be given. Also, the High Court, I've come across a lot of judgments of the single bench of the Honorable Delhi High Court as well as of the division bench, where the courts have lamented that a person in a commercial dispute who is affirming an affidavit or a statement of truth has been sometime a person who does not know even a wee bit of the dispute, underlying dispute. So that has been a concern wherein the courts have voiced their concern time and again. So now one is this. Another deterrent which has been added is in the form of an overall provision of Section 35. Now Section 35 deals with cost, which the court can impose in case either of the party, litigant party, tries to scuttle or unnecessary cause delay, do not perform an obligation which is mandatory in nature, do not file a proper application, proper plaint, or a written statement as prescribed by the rules, practice rules. And also, if either the plaintiff or the defendant, if the plaintiff files a frivolous litigation or the defendant defends a litigation by lodging a frivolous and a moonshine defense, what shall be the cost has been prescribed therein, which says Section 35 subsection 1 clause A to C provide that what shall be the legal cost. They say the quantum of those, it provides whether the costs are payable by one party to the another. So there is a discretion which has been vested with the court, the quantum of those costs and when they are to be paid. Now, it is not necessary under the commercial suit that the cost is to be paid at the end of the suit. Now, supposedly a person does not comply with a direction which is being passed, a routine direction to file a reply, or the sufficient documents have not been filed. In those cases, the court can also impose cost during the continuance of the suit, and it need not to wait till the end of the suit. Even for even a wee bit of a delay, even a partial delay, the court can impute cost and impose that cost on an individual litigant, and not necessarily it could be the defendant, it can be the plaintiff also. So there's another thing that supposedly a plaintiff files a suit for recovery and claims certain damages therein. He may succeed in the recovery, but if the court finds that the damages claimed by him or it are frivolous and the claim was not based on truth and absolutely it was just based to harass, in that case also the court can put plaintiff, despite giving a decree in his favor, he can be put on to cost. Now, after this, there was a Section 35A, which was there is a subsection 2 of Section 35A, which restricted the cost mechanism to 3,000, was done away with insofar as the Commercial Act is concerned. Now, there were certain rules which are amended and orders which are amended. Now, one of the important thing is vis-a-vis filing of the written statement. As per the Commercial Code Act, the written statement as per Order 5 Rule 1, as well as when the summons are received, which deals with the summon, as well as Order 8 Rule 1 as amended by the Commercial Codes Act, the CPC prescribes that in a commercial suit, you have to file a WS within a span of 30 days from the date the summons have been received. If you do not file it within 30 days, you can file it with the liberty of the court, and the court has the discretion to impose such cost, and the maximum time period which is given is 90 days in addition to 130 days. Now that is 120 days in total. Now there is a negative covenant in this, which prevents the courts to exercise their discretion in extending this time of 120 days by exercising their inherent jurisdiction under Section 151 of the CPC. And there have been judgments to that in effect, and the Supreme Court, Honorable Supreme Court, in the matter of SCG contracts, has categorically settled this issue. Now, another important aspect is how the form of pleading is to be made. Now, there is a substantial difference between a normal suit and a commercial suit when we file a plaint. In the normal CPC, we say that Order 6, Rule 1 says that a plaint has to be a statement of facts. You cannot file, you may or may not file a list of documents. It is not a mandatory, but when it comes to the commercial suit, it says that the plaintiff has to file a plaint, has to agitate specific disputes, refer specific provisions, and also provide for the documents, list of documents alongside. He may not make it as an annexure, but the list of documents that are to be filed, whether it is in his possession, whether he has a copy thereof, or if that document, though he is relying, but is in the custody of somebody else, supposedly defendant or some third party. So the list of documents cannot be simply the list of documents detailing A, B, C. These are the documents which I'm relying on. The list of document has to prescribe the nature of document, reliance placed on those documents, and whether those documents he has with him or it as an original or as a copy. If he is having a copy, then who is having the original? Everything is to be detailed out. Now, the manner in which it is to be filed has also been given. That's also been prescribed under the Commercial Courts Act. That the list, how the document is to be given alongside the plaint. Now, vis-a-vis written statement. With the written statement, there has been a change in the drift that along with the written statement, not only the documents, but also an affidavit of admission denial to the documents filed by the or relied upon by the plaintiff is to be filed. And if that is not filed, the written statement shall not be taken on record. Now, here I would like to clarify that this obligation to file a written statement is emanating out of the Delhi High Court rules. And a challenge was made where a commercial suit was pending before the Honorable, the learned district judge. And the district judge refused to take the written statement on record. The challenge was made by virtue of a writ petition before the Honorable High Court. Honorable Justice Pratibha M. Singh said that this condition, that the written statement cannot be taken on record in a commercial suit pending before the district court, is not a mandatory condition. The reason being that this condition is emanating out of the Delhi High Court rules. So it is mandatory for any suit filed before the Delhi High Court, but it is not mandatory vis-a-vis district courts. So this is a clarification which I wanted to make at the outset. And
sir, can we have this judgment's name and citation of the Pratibha I am saying?
I'll just let you know the citation right away.
Okay.
Yeah. That's it's. I thought that I'll keep it before the. So this the citation is Sudhakar Singh and another versus Webkul Software. The citation is 2020 SEC Online Delhi 436. Sudhakar Singh and another versus Webkul Software Private Limited.
Citation, please.
Citations, yeah, citation. I'll repeat again. It is 2020 SEC Online Delhi 436.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So now there's another shift and another amendment which is important, is that where a dispute pertains to be a monetary dispute and a person is claiming interest, in the plaint it is mandatorily that such interest is to be categorically specified. The rate at which is claimed, first of all, whether it is being claimed in terms of section 34 of the CPC or in terms of the contract. Then the pleading shall also state the rate, the time duration, the date from which it is claimed and to which it is being calculated as mentioned in the plaint. And after that, the total amount and the daily rate beyond that, which is a pendant light. Now, it is a mandate. So it cannot be the case where without specifically making a case or making an averment, therefore, one can seek as a prayer, merely as a prayer, add as an interest. that interest should also be governed. So for interest, it is a mandate in a commercial suit that you have to make a specific pleading therefore, along with specification of the date, the rate from which it is claimed, the interest which has been numerically mentioned, to which date it pertains to, and after filing of the suit, at what rate you wish to claim, which accrues after the date on a daily rate. Now, another important aspect is with respect to the written statement, and that talks about that how a denial is to be made to the plaintiff. Now, I came across many judgments by Justice Rajiv Sai and law. There was a judgment in the matter of GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, wherein it lamented that in a commercial suit, when you draft a defense, you cannot merely refer that denial to be a wrong and denied without explaining a reason. And that is coming forth even from the principles of the admission denial. So even in admission denial and also in the written statement, in admission denial, when you deny a document, you have to specify as to why you are denying the document, whether you're denying execution thereof, whether you're denying the contents, whether you're denying receipt thereof, whether you are denying the validity thereof, and why are you denying that. It cannot be the case that simply a document, let's say a bi-party contract is being executed, wherein a claim has been filed and subsequently a counterclaim also been filed, but just because that contract document has been filed by the plaintiff, and as a matter of mere denial, we file a written statement saying that we deny, or we file an admission denial document saying that we deny this very document, on which we are ourselves are basing our counterclaim. So that is one of the rules. Now, denial has to be, now with respect to the written statement, the courts and as well as the provision mandates that it needs to be specific. If you're denying an allegation, you have to deny as to why you are unable to admit it. What is the reason? If it is a fact, matter of fact, which you are denying in a plaint, in that case, you have to specify that why you are denying that fact, whether the factual matrix which have been averred in the plaint stands at variance as to the facts which are to be averred by the defendant. If that be so, then those line of facts of defendant, the defendant's side story has to be categorically specified in the written statement. Now, with respect to if you dispute the jurisdiction, then you must have to specify the reason therefore, that as to why the jurisdiction which is the jurisdictional court, which is trying the suit, should not try, and as to why the jurisdiction is not there with him. Now, these are the certain rules which have been formulated under Order 8, Rule 3A, which has been specifically inserted after Rule 3. Now, there's another important rules which have been there. 3 rules which have been orders which have been added. So one is Order 11. So Order 11 has been completely supplanted. Order 11 deals with disclosure, discovery, and interrogatories. Order 13A deals with summary judgment, which is a very important aspect in a commercial suit. And Order 15A, which is also important, which deals with a case management hearing. So for everything, there is a time which is being prescribed, even for a plaintiff where he files certain documents with the plaintiff. Now, supposedly there is an urgent matter which comes up, which comes for the drafting, and there are certain documents which are vested not with the person who is filing the suit, but with somebody who's not available at that point of time. At the time, and the suit is to be filed urgently, certain urgent reliefs are to be claimed. In that case, the provisions of the CPC give a mandate that you have a 30 days time period within which you can file those set of documents. And if that time goes beyond 30 days, then you have to show cause as to why you were prevented, and a cost is imputed therefore. Unless the documents are required to be put, you are saving those documents to be required to be put to a witness for the matter of cross-examination. And same is the case for the defendant. However, the defendant is not being given this 30 days leverage. And the procedure categorically prescribes anybody who is having a document and is deliberately not placing them on record, then the adverse inference would be drawn with vis-a-vis that document. Now, I'll come now to straight away to order 11, which is also a very important order which reads to discover, disclosure and discovery of documents. It says that wherever plaintiff files a list of documents as a photocopy, the original thereof are vested with the defendant, or in the possession, or probably the possession, control and everything is with the defendant or a third party, he can file an application with respect to the disclosure or inspection thereof, unless the documents are such that you want to place them for cross-examination of a defense witness or to answer any case. Now, there's another leeway which is being given in the practice rules. The leeway is supposedly the defendant files a written statement and provides certain documents. Now, the moment he files certain documents and sets up a case which stands at complete variance, in that case, and in order to rebut those contentions of the defendant, the plaintiff may have to file certain additional documents. So that leverage has been given to the plaintiff to file those documents along with his replication. Now, wherever you file a document, there has to be a statement of truth and it has to be based on affidavit. The statement of truth has to be as prescribed in terms of section 26, and it's already given in the appendix, which is appendix to order 6 rule 15a to be very specific. Now, another important aspect in order to deter a party to not to play games in a litigation which pertaining to a commercial suit, it has been provided categorically under order 11 rule 5, sorry, rule 1 rule 5, that in case a plaintiff is having a document but he does not file it, or even after the defense is disclosed and he has to rebut it in replication, and even then if he does not file it, then what happens? Then the plaintiff, after a period of time, will not be allowed to rely on that particular document even at the time of evidence or at the time of final hearing. Now, another important rule with respect to this is, now in this, what happened was, there's another case which I remember of the Delhi High Court of Justice Mukta Gupta, wherein she gave a leeway to the plaintiff to place on record the documents which the plaintiff could not file because of the reason that the documents were so voluminous and that it could not be filed, urgent release were claimed, and subsequently when the documents which are sought to be filed were in the nature of an admitted documents, they were annexures or attachments to the emails exchanged between the plaintiff and the defendant. So the plaintiff argued that I'm not setting up any new case vis-a-vis these documents. These documents I do not rake up a different claim or a separate claim or an additional claim, or I seek a separate right or a prayer. What I seek is that these are the emails which have been filed, and there's another documents which are an attachment to these emails which are now required to be placed on record. So in that case, the court permitted the plaintiff to place those documents on record after the time period of 30 days expired. And also plaintiff took an objection, took a plea rather, that these documents are required to be put to the witness of the defendant. And that is why they are important for the adjudication of the suit. Now, this is another thing. Now, let us see.
The citation?
Sorry?
Can you give me the citation?
Yeah, I can very well give you the citation. Just a minute. The citation is 2019 SCC Online Delhi 10647. Hasat Food, Hasat Food Company, QSC and another versus Bank of India.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, in the Order 11 also prescribes under Rule 2 the discovery by interrogatories. Now, in this, the interrogatories, there are certain deterrent features which have been added in terms of Sub-Rule 3, that the interrogatory need not to be unreasonable, vexatious, and elongated unnecessarily. It has to be specific, to the point, and for the issue which has been involved in the matter. Now, with respect to the interrogatories, how these interrogatories have to be formulated. Now, there is a specific form 2 in Appendix C which has been given to the CPC, right? And leeway is being given to cause variation subject to the suit and the subject matter of the dispute which has been involved, right? Now, another aspect is of inspection, that the documents which have been disclosed by the parties, be it plaintiff or the defendant, can be inspected by either party by filing an application. Now, there is a specific time limit which is being given. It is 30 days within which this application is to be decided. And the moment this application is decided, then within a period of 5 days, the party who has sought inspection should be allowed and to inspect the files and the documents. And if any party defaults, then there is a provision under subclause 6 of Sub-Rule 3 of Order 11, wherein the court has a power to impose exemplary cost. Now, I again come back to section 35, wherein I specified that the provisions with respect to the cost have been specifically mentioned and incorporated into the commercial suits while the amendments were made to CPC, so as to cause a deterrent to the party, so as to not play dirty. Now, another important rule is with respect to the admission denial. Now, as I already explained how the admission denial is to be done by either of the parties. Now, it details out that you need to file a statement of admission of denials. The correctness of the content of document is to be given, existence of a document, execution of a document, issuance and receipt thereof, custody, in whose custody that document is. So all these aspects have to be categorically specified in the statement of admission and denial. And if you are denying a document, as I said earlier, you have to specify a reason therefore. It cannot be that I simply deny this document or execution thereof. Now, however, the only leeway is that a bare denial is permitted to documents of third parties. Now, supposedly there is a list between A and B, and documents pertain to a C bank or a D bank. Those documents can be denied plainly, but not otherwise. Now, Rule 5 of Order 11 deals with production of documents. Production of documents. Hello. Yeah. With respect to the production of documents, you may go and seek production of documents also from the other party. And there is a time limit which is being given within which such production can be sought and is to be provided, which is 7 days with the minimum and 15 days the maximum. In case you are required to produce a document by the court, and if you do not do so, then accordingly an adverse finding is made with respect to this or thereof. Now,
voice is again very low.
Hello. Yeah, am I audible now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Now, so there are certain provisions with respect to the original documents, now there's another departure from the general rule of CPC in the commercial suits, which is that the original suits under the CPC, they require that the originals be produced at the time of admission denial. But with respect to the Commercial Courts Act, the amended rule, the amended Order 11 provides that certain provisions of the CPC which mandate the production of the original documents are to be done away with. And to my mind, I think the inapplicability of these provisions is considering keeping in mind the statement of truth which is being sought with the admission denial of the documents and along with the plaint. And the court can hold the person for perjury in case, or the contempt, in case any document which is tampered with or which is being created and for which there is no original and which is being disputed. Now we come to the important aspect, which is Order 13A, which is the summary judgment. Now, in CPC, as amended by the Commercial Courts Act, there is a specific order, Order 13A, which has been included. Order 13.
Request for the voice again, sir.
Hello.
Voice.
Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, with respect to Order 13A, Order 13A provides for summary judgment. Now, summary judgment stands at variance vis-a-vis Order 12, Rule 6, which provides for judgment on admission. Now, with respect to the summary judgment, it can be either for a part of claim or the complete claim, or a specific question or a specific issue, or probably a counterclaim. Now, another thing is the applicability of Order 13A is done away in the summary suits, even if they are commercial in nature. Hello. So, any suit which has been filed under Order 37, those suits, the provisions of summary judgment and Order 13A cannot be invoked. The reason therefore is that under Order 13A, under Order 37, of the CPC, the leave to defend is allowed only when a tribal issue is raised. Now the court, when at the first hearing or the second hearing, once the leave to defend application is heard at that point of time, arrives at a conclusion that the trial must proceed and there are several tribal issues which have been raised by the defendant. In that case, the court forms a prima facie view that there is an arguable case, may not be winnable, but the defense is not moonshine, but certainly a valid defense. Now, with respect to the summary judgment, on what grounds the summary judgment can be sought? Now, first thing is that the summary judgment has to be, the application for seeking a summary judgment has to be filed after the written statement is filed, or if not filed, then, and before the issues are being framed. That is the time period within which an application under Order 13A can be moved. Now, it can be moved on two primary grounds, which are A, if the plaintiff has no real prospect of succeeding the claim, or the defendant has no real prospect of successfully defending the claim. Or the second is that there is no other compelling reason as to why such claim should not be disposed without recording oral evidence. Now, the courts, there is a judgment of the single judge of the Delhi High Court in the matter of Sukam versus Kundan Sachdev, where it has been dealt in a very elucidating manner that when 13A can be invoked and what is a burden of proof. The burden of proof is much less as compared where a judgment is sought summarily
in any other suit or a judgment on admission is sought. The court said that what it has to see is that even if a defense is raised, that defense has no legs to stand, where certain documents, a commercial transaction, an obligation is being denied. The denial is merely without any evidence, without any substance, and the court can adjudicate at that stage itself qua the rights of the parties, either holistically or partly. It can either allow the suit, decree the suit, or it can also refuse and dismiss the suit, or it can adjudicate any issue or a part claim. Now, this is the thing. Now, this has been borrowed from Rule 24 of the CPC Civil Procedure Code of United Kingdom, which also has a similar paramateria clause, wherein the courts have exercised their discretion to order summary judgment and to not let the suit pass the entire trial. Now, there is a procedure which is being prescribed, and the procedure mandates when you file an application under Order 13A, you have to specifically disclose all the material facts, identify the point of law which you are making, then you have to include the documentary evidence on which you are relying, and you have to specifically, if it is a bundle of documents, then you have to specifically cater to the specific paragraphs or the specific pages on which you are relying. So all these information has to be made. Then a 30 days mandatory time period is to be given for the defendant to reply thereto. So it is not necessarily to be filed by the plaintiff, but defendant can also file this. So either party. So a 30 days notice is to be mandatorily given, and the date is to be fixed for hearing. Now, thereafter, the reply, what is an obligation in the reply? The obligation in a reply to such an application is to disclose, again, to disclose all the material facts, identify the point of law which the respondent is raking up in order to say that there is no case for summary judgment, and the reason why the relief claimed by the applicant should not be granted. Now, there's another issue with this, that supposedly during such application and application and response and reply, there are certain documents which have been filed by either parties. Then the other party is also being given a leverage to file certain other documents to rebut the allegations and the case made out by either party. Now, with respect to the what orders can be made by the court in such a application, on such a application under Order 13A, it can, as I said earlier, it can either pass a judgment on the claim, it can give a conditional order, dismiss the application, a part of judgment, strike out certain pleadings, or simply say that, you know, let's proceed to the case management hearing, which is also an important aspect I'll next come to. Under Rule 7 of Order 13A, the court can also pass conditional orders. The conditional orders are akin to orders being passed under Order 38 Rule 5 CPC, wherein, you know, the securities sought certain things. So the court may say, okay, the defense may not be completely moonshine, it may not be a fit case, but yes, the interest of the plaintiff is to be secured. In that case, it can ask call to either of the party to secure the amount in dispute by depositing the money in the court, or taking certain specified steps as may be necessary and relevant in the fitness of the facts and circumstances. Also, the court again in this order itself has another power to impose cost in terms of Section 35 and 35A of the code. Now, with respect to the commercial suits, the provisions of Order 15 has been done away with, and there has been a specific provision which has been added with respect to 15A, which is case management hearing. Now, this is very important. So what happens is, it provides how the case is to proceed once the admission denial has happened, and once the matter is put to trial, so in that case, Order 15A mandates that once the admission denial has happened, then the entire evidence and arguments and the cross examination and argument has to be wound up within a period of 6 months maximum. Now, it also mandatorily provides that whenever it also fixes first of all fixes a time for the cross examination. It cannot be that the cross examination will go on for years and years. And also with respect to the arguments, the timelines have been fixed. The court has an option, and the court should, and usually in the commercial cases, fix the time within which the arguments are to be concluded. Now, there's another thing which is very important with respect to this is that what the court can do. The court has a lot of powers in section, in
Mr.
Rule
Kunal,
6.
if you can hear me kindly, you can sum up this meeting because this meeting was supposed to be for 1 hour, and now people might have some work, so I request you.
Okay, I'm just concluding in 5 minutes more. I'm just concluding because this is a case management hearing. It's an important thing. So you just need to file written documents alongside, and along with the written arguments, you have to give specific case citations, and it has to be brief, and case citations also need to be there, so that what you have to argue the court should know, and what are your point of law which you need to argue. It has to be segregated with each step, and each para needs to be there. There can be adjournment also to the case management hearing, but yes, it would be subject to the cost. Now, these are the basic things which have been there provided for and which are necessary. Now, there are certain other things which the court has power in a commercial suit. The court has also power to control the evidence. It can redact and reject the evidence which has been filed. If the admission denial, if supposedly the chief is completely denial or argumentative in nature, then those parts can be denied for, right? And there have been guidelines which have been given, and certain things. There's another important aspect to sum up is the obligation on the court that when the arguments are complete, then within a span of 90 days maximum, the court has to pronounce judgment thereon. So this is a brief conspectus of the Commercial Courts Act, the practice and the procedures. The procedures are strict. There has been cost which has been imposed so that you do not drag the litigation incessantly. Hello. Nitesh?
Yes, I'm here only.
Yeah.
You can start taking up the questions.
Yes, Nitesh sir. Thank you, sir, for such an enlightening session. I hope that the Commercial Courts Act is basically a new act, and it is not clear amongst many of us. So the session that you conducted was really a fruitful session because we got to clear a lot of doubts, and the questions that have been put across to us participants are, the first question is by Nitesh sir only. He asks, can the defendant carry out the admission and denial without the inspection of the documents in commercial courts?
That the right to inspect has been vested, and in law a right to inspect also includes right not to inspect. Now it lies with the discretion of the defendant whether he wants to inspect the documents or does not. In case he wants to inspect the documents, then he has to file an application therefore, and if the application is allowed, then the plaintiff has to get the inspection make the inspection available within a span of 5 days maximum.
Thank you, sir. Our next question is from Angel Bhardwaj. He asks, how summary judgment under section 13A is different from judgment on admissions under Order 12 Rule 6 CPC?
So there is a substantial difference under Order 12 Rule 6, judicial discipline, and there's much greater. The admission under Order 12 Rule 6, the admission has to be unequivocal, and there should not be, the defense may be there, But if there are certain admissions which have been categorically made without any qualification, then the burden of proof is more in Order 12 Rule 6. Now coming back to 13A, Order 13A, which is a summary judgment, in that it is not necessary that the defendant would have made an admission in his defense on his written statement if whatever defense he rakes up is not a plausible defense or cannot stand on its legs at the ex facie, and the case is set up on a documentary basis, which documents he may not have denied completely in admission denial. In those cases, the burden of proof under Order 13A summary judgment is much less. And what the court has to see is whether it is necessary to elongate the court hearing, the case, by going ahead with the trial, or considering the fitness of the circumstances, the defense is already on record. It can be made out that even if this evidence is to be recorded, then also an arguments to be heard, then also the defense will not succeed.
Thank you, sir. As our next question is the judgment of commercial court appealable in High Court?
See so that's very important aspect insofar as the procedure is concerned. Now there is a difference, there is a variation. Now with respect to the high courts, wherein there is original pecuniary jurisdiction vested, which are Bombay, Madras, Calcutta, Delhi, and J&K. In those cases, an order passed by the district court, commercial court in the district courts is appealable in the commercial division of the appellate court, which is High Court. Vis-a-vis the High Courts where you do not have a commercial original pecuniary jurisdiction, those cases, the order is appealable it can be appealable before the single judge of the Honorable High Court, Commercial Appellate Division.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry, Commercial Appellate Court. I stand corrected.
Thank you, sir. Our next question is, in case the defendant fails to submit his WS within 120 days before,
Right.
Can he still participate in the proceedings?
Yes, he can still participate in the proceedings, but in that case, what I feel is that there'll be the next, strategically, the next application would be under Order 13A for the summary judgment, because per se there is no defense.
Right. Thank you. Our next question is, if there is a contract between an employer and an employee and a dispute arises between them, can such kind of dispute be covered under the Commercial Courts Act?
Certainly. It is a commercial dispute.
All right. Our next question is, in case management hearing is mandatory,
Right.
can court do it suo motu at any stage of trial?
No, it is not that any stage of trial. The court has to do it suo motu the moment admission denial of the documents happens. Thereafter, it is a mandate of Order 15A that the case management hearing has to be undertaken by the court.
The next question pertains to the fact that is every suit for recovery is of commercial transaction only?
No, it's not necessarily. The commercial dispute has been defined in Section 2 of the Commercial Courts Act, and it has a very expansive definition. It's an inclusive definition, and anything which is a commercial nature, which refers to any trade or commerce. So if a recovery is emanating out of a contractual dispute or a performance of a service or goods or trade of goods, those cases would certainly fall under the Commercial Courts Act.
Our next question is, will CPC be affected by changes in labor laws in various states?
See, it's a very, I don't think so. It's a proper question per se, but the CPC cannot have an effect with vis-a-vis a labor law, because labor laws are usually applicable and invoked by the workmen, and they are specifically governed by the Industrial Disputes Act. So that is why the role of CPC would be very limited. So the procedure.
Thank you, sir. This is my question. The question is, sir, since we are aware of the fact that the procedural laws are applicable retrospectively, so as far as this Commercial Courts Act is concerned, is it also retrospectively applicable?
No, this
No, this is
Because
not. No, this is not. So the Commercial Court Act, which has been promulgated in 2018, it is applicable from 3rd May of 2018, with retrospective effect from 3rd May of 2018, not from 2050.
all right, so in that case, what I understand is any case which was already pending adjudication before a civil court prior to 2018, 3rd of May, will
Right.
be taken up by those courts only, and the cases which have been filed post that date will
Right.
be commercial courts, right?
Uh, no, see, the commercial courts came in 2015, so there is a provision of Section 15 which says transfer of pending cases. So wherever the jurisdiction cases which were there, because if you see before 2015, the original jurisdiction of the district court, the High Court, was increased to 2 crores.
Right.
And yes, and the commercial disputes, when the Commercial Courts Act came, the jurisdiction was mandated to be 1 crore. So any dispute, any case which was then below 1 crore was a normal civil suit. Was then transferred. It was transferred post coming in infraction of the Commercial Courts Act, was changed to be commercial suit.
All right, thank you, sir. As far as I can see, I find no further questions. Now I'll pass it over to Nitesh, sir.
May I now request Chakit Singhal sir to please give a thanking note to our today's speaker, Mr. Kunal Sabharwal. Over to you,
Yes.
Chakit.
Hello everyone, myself Chakit Singhal, advocate. I would like to take this opportunity to give my vote of thanks to Mr. Kunal, Mr. Nitesh, Mr. Angel, and Ms. Jyoti, who have given their precious time for organizing this meeting and to educate us in this lockdown period when we have nothing much to do except to gain the knowledge through this technology only. My special thanks to Mr. Nitesh, who has organized the today's meeting, which went on very smoothly and without any interruption. Finally, I wish good luck to you all and request you to be safe and calm in this pandemic era. Thank you.
I again, once again, thank to all of my viewers who have joined us today and interruptly viewed the today's lecture, which has been given by Mr. Kunal Sabharwal on the technical topic being the Commercial Courts Act and its practice and procedure. I think much light have been thrown by him on the subject, and I think this would definitely benefit the young guys and the young advocates, and not even the young, even we people who are having a little less knowledge about this technical act, about its procedure. So thanks a lot once again, Kunal Sabharwal sir, and we are further looking for much more informative sessions on some other subjects from you. Over to you.
Thank you, Nitesh. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you, Chakit. Thank you, Angel. Thank you for affording me an opportunity. And I know I breached the time limit, but usually it happens with the councils. They keep on taking certain time, and so I hope everybody, people who were listening, the audience benefited thereof. Therefore, and I'm deeply obliged for affording this opportunity to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you all my associates and all the persons who have joined us in making this webinar successful. Thank you all of you.